Hey guys, I'm back with another video today, and it's about a topic that these guys have been kind of writing about in their stories, and it's kind of they do it very poorly in my opinion. So what are they writing about? Well, sexual assault and rape mostly. But the reason why I'm talking about this isn't because, they did the same thing, like plagiarize. It's how they treat it. Like, obviously, these are heavy topics. You need to do research and just understand why it's such a big deal, even in stories. Like, it's not just fiction, it's just a real traumatizing thing that someone can experience. I've personally never experienced this at all in my life, but I don't know if they have either. It's not up to them to expose themselves on the internet, and they're free to vent out their experiences in their stories, but I think they do such a poor job at it, and it comes off as very insensitive and tone deaf. This isn't to say that they can't write down SA or any of those topics, but I do want them to make sure they know what they're doing, since it is a touchy subject and you're going to offend people if you don't do it right. As I read their stories, because, I don't want to just be out here hating. I want to give my reasons and explain. I'll also mention some other things related to the topic of SA, like grooming, age differences, only for a brief mention, because some of these stories they write kind of implies it. Of course, this isn't real. I mean, the characters aren't real, so they're not really harming anyone, but I still think it's important to talk about and should be acknowledged to write topics like this with care. I think Raven is the worst one in this list because she doesn't treat SA as something traumatic, only something to serve her story or to make one of her OCs that's a villain like even more evil, which in my opinion feels like a cop-out and very lazy if you don't want to do the work into making like an evil OC. All you think about is just throwing in every single bad thing that they can do. They choose to write these topics in a very tone-deaf kind of way, and in my opinion feels kind of gross to read. She does this a couple of times in her stories and her OC's biographies. As many as she has so far, I think this one is the worst. She ships herself with Leo from the Ninja Turtle series, the 2012 version, and these three OCs are basically their fictional kids for her next story. So just like her other OCs, she makes a whole biography for them. And when we get to the youngest OC that's in that group, she writes some pretty weird stuff about her. And in the comments, they kind of show how much they don't really care about the topic of rape and SA. I mean, Raven here flat out says it herself. She only wrote that because she got inspired by an anime, which I find to be really insensitive and weird. There's also this really weird thing that they do where they ask for a reaction in the comments. Like, forget the topic of rape and SA. What was your reaction to when she got raped and SA'd? Like, that's what I hear, basically. As gross as that sounds, but yeah, I don't really see them taking the topics as serious as it is. I hope you understand what I mean. Like, they treat the topics as just something to use for their OCs. There's no purpose for them other than to create drama and trauma and just something to talk about. What I find weirder and grosser is that she chose to make her youngest OC be the one to get assaulted. This isn't even her first time doing this. In 2020, I believe, when I made my Raven document, the whole plagiarizing situation was basically her taking someone else's story. But not only that, she replaced an adult character who also got assaulted with a child. And as shown right now, you can see my reaction to that I still think it's really weird that she replaced an adult character in the original story with a child to be raped. I don't know why she did that, other than to push two characters together. And since I did read that book, I don't have any screenshots because this was a long time ago and the book is already deleted. The next OCs are these two. One from her friend and another is hers. The lore that they have is that these two are antagonists, but they're also enemies to each other. And the brown-haired OC made by her friend is labeled as someone interested in other guys. This is worth mentioning because in Raven's biography for the both of these OCs, he states that these two OCs grow to be more comfortable with each other, but not romantically. And just like her OC with Leo, they end up having kids for the story to continue. And I'm highly sure that this is SA considering his sexuality as a gay person being forced into a relationship with someone he's not interested in. The topic of drinking and also having intercourse is also mentioned here, but of course they pushed that aside for the sake of making new rival OCs for their children OCs. I do not know if this counts as SA, but I'ma still explain and put it in here just because. So Raven has an OC slash persona. I don't know if it's even an OC if she keeps saying it's herself, but I'm pretty sure it's just a persona of herself. So OC or not, she basically has the trope of her OC being like half a demon, and she has like a very long and heavy lore drop on her OC's parents, which her mother is the demon queen and her father's like a wizard. And as you can see, I screenshot their ages because when you get to their lore, it sounds kind of weird. As you can read, her OC's mother trapped her father into making her OC the ultimate weapon. This is where I don't know if this counts as SA, because you have one OC wanting something from the other, which is, I would say, a child or a weapon, as she calls it, because that's what Raven's OC is. And as Raven puts it, her father was currently being tortured and forced to create her. This just kind of gives me the ick and gives me very like SA undertones. Her OC's ages are also important to remember because she seems to like the anime trope of a character looking like a kid or having the physical body of a child and being 1,000 years old, and creating weird age gaps of her characters, like this one for example. Also, in her description, the topic of rape is mentioned. In the most underlined paragraph, she mentions how, since this character likes to be a troublemaker, that her getting raped was karma. And of course, I found that icky because that's like saying she deserved it for messing around. This other character she has is her love interest. And this is where it becomes more evident of their age gap. Raven specifically says that this OC is over 50 years old, but due to the fairy, pixie, whatever crap that she made, makes her stay young. She writes that they fell in love and end up having a kid. This does count as teenage pregnancy, and as Raven flat out says, the male OC who is 17 will father the child. She does point that out. This is meant to be a kind of a tragic love story, but I can't help but focus on their age gap. And of course, her friends and fans don't really see what's wrong with this. This one isn't as bad as the rest, as the girl is the only one that really ages while the guy stays at 18, but there's still kind of like an age gap there. Raven also has another character who is a minor and does tend to as she wrote, seduce guys her age. Well, there's no age gap or any problematic issues there. Raven doesn't really use this theme to explore her character or even try to send a message. The only one being that she lacked attention as a child, so she behaves this way. And that could actually be a good writing choice. I mean, it's been done before, but for someone like Raven, I don't think she'd do a very good job at that. And since she did make this OC kind of seduce men her age and sleep with them, she could have also explored sexual trauma, even teenage pregnancy, and just exploring their sexualities. But in the comments, she's very clearly disgusted by this, as I show comments of her and her best friend talking. But this was them basically discussing their bad OCs and how similar they are to each other. And I find how weird that they're in their 20s talking about minor fictional characters and their sexualities. And I'm not saying you can't talk about this. I'm saying how Raven and Ola seem to shame these types of themes. And if you notice how her friend kind of says this, she also ships herself with a minor OC like she does. This isn't like a fictional crush anymore. It's like an obsession, and me and my friends find it weird how she's kind of pushing her 20s into her 30s now. If they made like an OC, that would be perfectly fine, but they don't. They just make themselves and just kind of age themselves down just to be with their favorite character. And even if it's fictional, I think that's still creepy. This is why I found this super weird and kind of gross, because why are they kind of beefing with their own fictional minor characters? Especially Ola here, because she's kind of beefing with her own minor character against another minor character she has a crush on, and she's an adult. Speaking of her other OC that she was talking about with Raven, except they do shame this one, as she's just written to be a bad person in her story. As she writes, this minor OC sleeps with older men, which does count as grooming, I guess SA, and pedophilia. And like I said, there could generally be a good story in there, but they just don't care. This is just gross to them, and nobody ever picks up on this or calls them out. This book isn't really up anymore, and I had to dig through screenshots that I discussed with my friends about this. And in this one, she did kind of write like a rape scene. But since you're gonna have to kind of go with my word on this one, it didn't really lead to anything. Like, it was just kind of thrown in there just to make Ola look like a good person, because her OC's whole thing is about being a detective. So you can kind of tell where that was going. But from what I remembered, there isn't really much to that plot. The next one is Jacob, and as I mentioned before how weird he is with his OCs, there's this one girl OC he has with blue hair, and I believe is a minor, if older, but still kind of weird, because her whole personality is basically the crazy ex-girlfriend trope. Like, her whole character revolves around him and how she wants to be his and all that. Just doesn't have a character in general. And he is also an adult pushing into his 20s. But otherwise, this character was meant to be seen as like a villain. He basically isn't a character and gets no justice, because just like Raven, she used other characters to kind of make a next generation and have like new kids to rival the other kids. You know, he also does that too, except that with this OC called Natalie, he kind of does a really bad take on SA. And as you can read, the whole reason she got raped was because of him, because she was obsessed with him and he didn't like her back. So for some reason, Jacob thinks it's a good idea to make her get SA'd and then commit it and try to make a story with her kid. When I read this, it just feels really heartbreaking in my opinion. Like, I don't care if she's written to be a bad person, I'm going to feel empathy for this type of stuff that actually happens. And nobody seems to like actually care in the comments as usual. It's just really disgusting in my opinion. Even if this OC had done really bad stuff. I wouldn't wish for this upon anyone. His next OC is a demon who presents herself as a child. And this one I find like really gross because it's kind of just thrown in there. This child OC he made literally gets assaulted because what do you mean they have their way with her? And like the rest of their friends, nothing is explored of their trauma and how they deal with it. It's just added in there for some reason. There are a few moments he does mention SA in his books, but it's not that much to say the least. On Wattpad, he has this book, and as I read through the chapters, this book is pretty much rated for mature audiences, but as I read, there was this trigger warning, and I genuinely thought that this story would actually have like something kind of related to SA, but it was just only this part of the story, and this kind of sucks because male SA is so undervalued. But Jacob kind of just makes this a one-off joke with how he responds towards the bottom of the paragraph. While the trigger warning is valid, it just feels more like sexual harassment than SA. It's just so weird to add in and say that this is SA because nothing really happened. And since Jacob is the protagonist in this story he made, he isn't really affected by this experience, just weirded out. This book hasn't been updated yet, but I feel like even then, this part of the story would still be glossed over, just like Raven and Ola do with their stories of SA. Now, there's this one thing that I remembered on his YouTube channel that I found very weird. He does a lot of music videos, but like in the way you use a picture and have music in the background type of videos. So when I kind of saw this, I was really icky. There's this character named Angel Dust who does adult work but also gets abused by his manager. And there are like 3 or 2 songs about his abuse, and the lyrics themselves explore that. But it's not just abuse, it's literally SA. And Jacob likes to use songs from the show to make into music videos. And this is my issue with this one in particular because this song that he used is from Angel Dust's Poison, and it literally is about SA. He even says it in the description himself that he feels sorry for any victims hurt by this. But then he goes back into saying that this video was made for fun, ignoring the message of the song. And it threw me off because I don't know why or how you think that this would be like a fun thing to do. What is even fun about this? And I know he isn't talking about SA. I'm talking about how the song Poison was meant to talk about Angel's abuse, but he makes this video literally saying with the intention of having fun. And that's just weird in my opinion. Also, there's this one book he did when he was, I believe, 17. Like, kind of like a minor, but I feel like he still should have known better. And he did because, well, when he was caught writing that, he took it down immediately. And based on what he wrote, he definitely knows what pedophilia is. But this book he did was literally just that. And literally the title just speaks for itself. As I told one of my friends this, she kind of went up to him and said that that was not okay to do. And just like that, he took it down. But still, the fact that he even made this book in the first place kind of speaks a lot about him. Even if I'm bringing up like old drama or whatever this is, it's just weird. And seeing how he kind of doesn't change based on the evidence that I have of him, I think it's just very telling that he's just a gross person. Next person we have is Michaela, which I mentioned in a previous video. She is also Jake's sister, and just like her friends, she also writes SA a couple of times, although it is just mentioned and not really focused on. For example, in her OC's backstory, we more or less get her parents' point of view, and her mother in this story, I guess, implied to be SA'd as the male character in this biography. As you can read it says that he casted a spell on her which caused her to be unexpectedly pregnant. And like Raven, this just feels like it has some SA undertones to it, and it's not mentioned or even said aloud. So since she's using magic in this, imagine meeting someone and you're suddenly pregnant without like your acknowledgement or you even consenting to it. That just feels like rape. And of course, this isn't acknowledged or touched upon or explored or anything like that because they always kill their parents' OCs. In another story that she based off around a musical called Epic, as something that I've never seen, only heard before. I've heard she does use some parts of the story, but I'm not really interested in it, so I'm just gonna have to read this and assume she stole it from the story, like she did with K-pop Demon Hunters. The story does have a warning as well, and it starts by a succubi seducing someone who does not really want to do that. This is somewhat SA, as well, nothing really happened. The succubi still try to coerce him into doing it. And onto the upcoming chapters, Michaela writes that the succubi had lost a sister who was also a succubi, yet younger and inexperienced, who ends up getting assaulted and killed by another person. Something that literally happens in real life way too often. But do they even do anything or pay attention to this aspect of the story? Not really. I mean, it's not even original because Michaela straight up just takes this from a freaking musical. But just like her friends, the essay is tossed aside and just made to be somewhat plot relevant. And as usual, the comments, aka her friends, don't really care. They treat it like some kind of pop quiz. Don't understand why they always want a reaction from their writing. So what can we get by from all of this? I think Raven and her friends are just weird and, well, half of them are technically bad people. I wouldn't be too surprised if they were just being ignorant or tone deaf, because I don't know how you can read this or even write it and kind of just don't think that there's something wrong with what you're writing. I mean, Raven flat out plagiarized someone and pretends she didn't do anything wrong. But, like, they're aware that rape and assault is bad, yet they choose to just kind of do the minimum amount of writing it properly. I don't know if they've been in this type of situation before, and I'm perfectly fine with them kind of exploring their own trauma. But they do such a poor job, in my opinion, that it comes out as very tone deaf and almost offensive. Although this is just my opinion and me criticizing them as someone who hasn't been assaulted at all, it just feels really icky and gross that they're kind of using these tropes for their story and not really doing their research or just trying to be respectful of people who get SA'd. Because even if it's just writing, it still matters because SA and rape are a real thing. Like, you can't just write whatever you want with these topics because they're sensitive topics for a reason. But Raven and her friends just don't care as long as it moves the plot forward. Characters being SA don't matter because their trauma matters more, I guess. I'm just trying to make sense of why they don't really care that much. But I'll just assume that it's just because it makes the story happen, which is a very gross thing to do. In short, I just don't think they should keep writing at all, even after what Raven did and what her friends are also kind of contributing, which is plagiarism and also surrounding themselves with a bad person like her. And with all the images I've proven, it's just telling that they should not be writing these type of topics like at all. They're also all adults and should know better. It's so gross to use SA and rape as kind of a boost for your story. But that's the end for this video. Revisiting all this evidence made me realize how weird they are with treating SA. And I wish they'd go back to writing childish stuff like they did in Wattpad and leave mature themes alone. I remember calling out Raven on this with a character she depicted with depression and made them almost commit in her story. And I found that very icky and offensive, yet she blocked me even after I kind of warned her about that. I'm just tired of them getting away with being able to write this stuff and not really giving it the care that it deserves. But regardless, if they continue, then so will I, and I'll keep making videos on them if and whenever they stop.